Here is a new building in China. Those red signs have two words on them: rush sale. Homeowners are in a hurry to sell their homes before they even move in. China's real estate industry turned from hot to cold to depressed overnight. The turning point happened in September 2021 when Evergrande Group, the #1 real estate company in China, suddenly went into trouble. The rating agency, Fitch, downgraded Evergrande from C to restricted default on December 9, 2021. It's the first time that Evergrande was listed in the category of defaulters officially defaulting on its debts. Fitch said Evergrande didn't respond to Fitch's request for confirmation on whether it had met or missed an interest payment of $82 million to bondholders due December 6th, prompting the rating firm to take action. Another major Chinese developer, KAISA Development, has also been placed in restricted default by Fitch. The company failed to pay $400 million to bondholders earlier in the year. The two companies, Evergrande and KAISA, together account for about 15% of the outstanding US dollar bonds sold by Chinese developers. This is a case in Guangzhou where home buyers of KAISA have waited 5 years and ended up with an unfinished building.
These are homeowners of KAISA #1 property going into the building with officials from the Housing and Construction Department. We want to expose KAISA's lies that have been going on. The owners have been inside the building to check things out. Last month, KAISA told us that the building would be completed and inspected by November 30th. Now the main body of the building isn't finished yet. Glass hasn't finished installation. There are no workers on site. Only 1 or 2 workers are assigned here every day to 4 people. Their purpose is to scam people who haven't bought a home yet and come to see it, and then scam them for more money. And when they have more money in hand, they're ready to flee. I think this is their plan.
Let's go back to the Evergrande Group. The company owns more than 1,300 projects in more than 280 cities in mainland China. For months, global markets have been watching its plight, a real estate giant on the verge of bankruptcy that carries more than $300 billion in debt, while some experts estimate its off-balance sheet debt may be another $156 billion. With $19.2 billion of US dollar-denominated debt in Evergrande's portfolio, Fitch's downgrade could trigger cross-defaults on those debts. Although on the surface, Evergrande hasn't yet entered into any type of bankruptcy filing, liquidation, or other proceedings that would halt its operations. In the US and many other places, bondholders can push a company into some form of restructuring against its will, usually through the courts, and then split the money to repay the debt. But since Evergrande is a Chinese company, overseas investors have essentially no choice but to wait. What results will these overseas investors get? 2 months ago, on October 8th, in an interview with Bloomberg TV, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the U.S. wanted China to take responsible action against the financial crisis brought on by Evergrande, i.e. that Beijing should stabilize its dollar-denominated debt. Also, the U.S. government has listed China's real estate debt as the 3rd largest risk to its economy. Blinken's concerns are well justified. The Evergrande crisis has broad implications for the Chinese economy and foreign investors. Its default could expand the $19.2 billion default several-fold, while implicating hundreds of billions of dollars in debt issued by a large number of other Chinese real estate companies. If these dollar-denominated bonds do default, world-class financial institutions represented by Wall Street would be involved, along with many derivatives issued by Goldman Sachs and others that insure the bonds. Unfortunately, Blinken will be disappointed. The most obvious sign is that Evergrande issued an announcement on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange on the evening of December 3rd to confirm its overseas secured private debt with a total amount of $260 million has defaulted. The $260 million matured debt accounted for less than 0.5% of the company's total debt and was very small. But, as its creditors are overseas investors, it means that the awaited shoe has finally dropped and that Evergrande has confirmed to have the first default on its overseas debt. Evergrande's announcement on December 3rd clearly stated that failure to fulfill guarantees or other financial obligations may result in creditors demanding accelerated maturity of debts. This is a subtle phrase that is critical, or, to be precise, it means Evergrande intends to leave the overseas debts to default in the event of a failure to fulfill domestic financial obligations. At around 9 p.m. the same day, the Guangdong provincial government issued a press release on its official website expressing its grave concern and immediately met with Xu Jiayin, the person in charge of China Evergrande Group, and then announced that a working group would be sent to Evergrande to map out the situation. Within 30 minutes after the release of the Guangdong government's press release, various authorities such as the Central Bank of China, the China Banking Regulatory Commission, the Securities and Futures Commission, and the Ministry of Housing and Construction all took a position in support of the Guangdong government. Their basic stance is that the risk of Evergrande Group is mainly due to its own mismanagement and mindless expansion, while emphasizing that the risk of individual real estate enterprises in the short term won't affect the normal financing function of the market in the medium and long term. The statement was made late at night, and there's a high probability that several relevant authorities in the Chinese government have already discussed the plan in advance, which also means that the top echelon of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, has already made an arrangement, that is, to protect the stability of the domestic market at all costs, even at the expense of slashing the international capital market. Jiang Feng, an expert on China issues and a veteran American media personality, believes that the future of Evergrande is to accept the overall arrangement of the CCP Central Committee. In all likelihood, various state officials, including national security officers, political and legal officials, and financial regulators, are now in Evergrande to take over its corporate decisions and finances and proceed with the liquidation. The goal of liquidation and debt repayment is to first ensure the domestic situation and set the priority of asset liquidation. That is, in the face of domestic instability, Wall Street and other international capital markets will be ditched by the CCP. Two individuals with knowledge of Evergrande had told Reuters in October that Chinese Communist authorities had asked Evergrande's owner, Xu Jiayin, to use some of his personal wealth to make payments to bondholders. Previously, Evergrande's actions were focused on portraying Xu himself as doing his best to repay the bonds. According to media reports, Xu sold a Hong Kong mansion, his private jet, and some of his shares in July for roughly $1.1 billion in cash. In late November, one of Xu's sons sold a Los Angeles mansion for a low price of $12.5 million. Such stories haven't elicited any sympathy from the Chinese public. After all, the Chinese public has already learned that Xu, as the majority shareholder of Evergrande with more than 70% of the shares, has cashed in $7.85 billion through dividends over a decade. After being forced to sell some of its shares, the Xu family's shareholding has now dropped to 59.78%. If one were to put oneself in the shoes of the Xi Jinping administration, one would be able to understand the dilemma this administration is in. Today's real estate market is heavily indebted due to the highly bubbly development of China's real estate economy over the past 30 years. China's real estate risk has far surpassed that of Japan's bubble economy 30 years ago. The link to the video on this topic is available below in the comments section. If nothing is done to the real estate sector now, the bursting of the bubble could happen at any time, which would destroy China's economy instantly. But once the government starts to rectify the real estate sector and squeeze the bubble, it's pushing China's housing market into a downward spiral quickly, resulting in the collapse of a whole lot of real estate companies. If these large real estate companies are left to collapse, it will destabilize the real estate market and the financial system in China, and leave many homeowners who have paid for but not yet received their homes with nothing. If the government gives a helping hand, it may send a signal that the CCP will step in to bail out real estate companies that are carrying huge debts. In reality, China's land-based economy has reached its end. with both central and local governments being squeezed by debt and China's foreign exchange reserves facing depletion. These topics have been covered in the video links posted below if you're interested. In addition, many of China's leading real estate companies are backed by Xi's political rival, Jiang Zemin's group. Over the past few decades, Jiang's power brokers have acquired vast wealth, hollowed out these major real estate companies, and are now dumping their debts on Xi's administration. Beijing's Three Red Lines policy, introduced in August 2020, was designed to prevent developers from running up debts and to deflate the real estate bubble. 1 year later, it triggered the meltdown of the Evergrande Group and created an irreversible domino effect. On December 7, 2021, China's media Economic Daily published an article saying that in one province of Guangdong alone, there's a lineup of real estate companies waiting to pop. At least 10 of China's mega real estate companies are already heavily indebted, and their share prices keep falling. These include Fantasia, Sinic Holdings, Greenland Group, China Fortune Land Development, and many more. As of November 2021, more than 400 real estate companies in China have declared bankruptcy. The government intervention has severely undermined confidence in real estate and even affected people's love affairs.
以前都说不买房娶不到老婆，现在可好。
In this video, the narrator laments that in the past, Chinese men couldn't get married without owning a home. But now, some girls are afraid that you have a home. He cited the example that a friend of his bought a home in the suburbs of Beijing in 2016. It was an 85 square meter two-room apartment with a total payment of $376,000 US. He had paid the bank a total of $94,000 in 5 years, of which $63,000 was interest. Now he still owes the bank $283,000, but the value of his home has fallen to $204,000. Even if he sells the home, he still has to pay nearly $80,000 to the bank. If he doesn't sell it, he will have to serve as a high monthly mortgage, and if he misses a payment, he will become a delinquent. Women who understand the market situation will flee as soon as they hear that someone has bought a home in the 3 northern suburbs of Beijing. These are the risks of actively squeezing the bubble, which may turn out to burst the bubble instead. Especially given the quality of the CCP's corrupt bureaucrats and the grossly falsified data, it's quite possible that the government will make mistakes in managing the asset bubble and end up in an unmanageable situation. But Beijing has no other choice but to rely on administrative measures now. It can only squeeze and stop and take one step at a time. A few days ago, the People's Bank of China announced a 0.5 percentage point downgrade effective December 15th, releasing 1.2 trillion RMB, or $188.4 billion US in long-term funds. The full-scale downgrade, usually seen by the public as a signal of a general relaxation of monetary policy, has provided more cash for banks to issue loans. The so-called downgrade is a cut to the reserve requirement ratio. The central bank requires major banks to deposit a portion of their funds with the central bank as reserves. For example, if Bank A has 100 million in reserves with the central bank and the reserve ratio is 10%, then the amount the bank can lend is 1 billion. If the central bank lowers the reserve ratio to 5%, the amount the Bank A can lend becomes 2 billion, double the previous figure. Therefore, the central bank's lowering the base interest rate is a massive stimulus. The result is excessive borrowing, inflation, rising prices, asset bubbles, and even financial turmoil. The Wall Street Journal reported on December 8th that the cut was actually against the wishes of China's central bank. China's central bank has been supportive of tightening on real estate lending over the past, arguing that relaxing credit would only worsen speculative bubbles. The report said that in recent weeks, China's Central Commission for Discipline and Inspection visited the central bank's headquarters and sent an unusually harsh message that the Communist Party wouldn't tolerate any talk of independence of the central bank, and that the monetary department, like other government departments, must follow the party's command. 3 days later, the central bank announced a cut in rates. In recent years, China's central bank has tried to follow the example of its Western counterparts to build credibility among investors at home and abroad. But in Red China, the Communist Party's leaders trust their own judgment more than the industry's experts. Not to mention that in a volatile economy, maintaining social stability is always the priority of the government. Regarding its reputation among international investors, the CCP doesn't care about it all that much.